Hi folks, my name's Jem, I'm the Crazy Pigeon Lady, and it's my mission to entertain, educate and inspire people with all things pigeon and dove. Welcome back to this, my series, hashtag Ask the Crazy Pigeon Lady, where I am taking your questions. If you haven't asked a question already, please pop it down in the comments and I will endeavour to get to as many questions as I possibly can. This week we have a question from M. Mercino, who asked, how do pigeons in the wild split up duties to do with egg sitting and feeding? Great question. So here's the answer for you. Pigeons and doves of pretty much all species that we know and have been observed to any degree co-parent their young. So unlike other birds where they perhaps might only be taken care of by solely the male or solely the female, pigeons and doves are co-parenting birds, so they work together to raise their babies, and this is part of an efficient breeding strategy. They generally produce 1 or 2 eggs. They're focused on and raised and brought up by both parents to give them the best chance of raising 100% yield, if you like, of healthy babies from the eggs that they lay. So in order to do this, they do split up the duties between them. It's hard work looking after babies, especially as pigeons feed them from pigeon milk, which is a substance they excrete from the cell lining in their crops. And this contains an enormous amount of protein and fats and energy, so it's very tiring for the pigeons to produce it. So they have to go and make sure that they themselves are well fed in order to feed the pigeon milk. So they have to share the duties between themselves to make sure that each parent gets time to go and feed and replenish themselves so that they can then sustain their babies. So generally the duties will be divided like this. The male will generally sit the eggs during the day. He'll take over from the female who's been sitting during the night sometime in the morning, and this could be quite variable. So the male will sit on the nest during the day, staying on the nest site, keeping those eggs warm, keeping the babies warm once they've hatched, feeding them when they're hungry, and of course keeping them dry if it's raining, shading them if it's sunny. If the babies are a little older and they no longer need brooding quite so much because they can regulate their own temperature, then the males may sit by the nest rather than sitting on the nest, especially if it's a particularly hot day in the summer. Then at some point later on in the day, the female, who will have spent the day feeding and replenishing herself, will come back to the nest site, and then there'll be a changeover of duties, and she'll take over in the late afternoon, early evening, and then she will look after the babies throughout the night, and she will remain on the nest during the night. Now, whilst one bird is staying on the nest, generally the other bird doesn't remain by the nest site, primarily so that they can go and feed and replenish themselves. But another reason not to remain close to the nest site is to avoid attracting the attention of predators. Lots of hanging around and activity of the nest site can attract unwanted attention from predatory birds, for example, so magpies, other corvids who might want to steal the eggs from the nests or the young babies or whatever. They don't present a threat to the adult birds as such, so rats, for example, are another predator who might attack nests. They don't represent much of a threat to the adult birds, but it's the babies and the eggs who are vulnerable. So the adults don't want to attract any attention to the nest site so that predators find out about it. So they tend to make sure that they stay away from the nest site when they're not sitting on the nest. The amount of time they spend sitting on the nest will vary as the babies get older. So as the babies grow, they will need feeding less often. They'll be able to physically get out of the nest themselves and might sit on the branch, move around nearby so they can start exercising their legs, exercising their wings and building up their wing muscles. So the parents will have less of a role in brooding and feeding the babies as they get older, feeding less often, brooding less often, and allowing the babies to get a little bit more independence. Now, depending on the species, once the babies are fledged, i.e. they're ready to leave the nest completely, the gender roles may change. So in feral rock pigeons, for example, which I talk a lot about on this channel, the male will take on the role of finishing off the weaning of the babies and then getting them integrated with the flock, when they'll then learn everything they need to know about how to be a pigeon from the social group. And the female will get back on the nest, ready to start laying the next lot of eggs while daddy's finishing weaning the babies and getting them into the flock, and then he'll come back and join her. In other species, the process is a little different. Where they're not social, like rock pigeons are, so for example the Eurasian wood pigeon, the babies don't have a flock to integrate to learn how to be a pigeon. So the adults have to remain with them and will do so for a few weeks, and the babies will hang around with the adults while they graze, forage, find food, so that the babies can learn where food is and how to find it and what good food looks like. And both the parents will participate in that process. So there you go, M. Mersino. I hope that has answered your question about how pigeons in the wild divide up the duties. So in summary, they are co-parenting birds. Both males and females will take part in raising of their babies, and generally the female will do the night shift nest duties, the male will do the day shift nest duties, and together they will work to raise their babies into adulthood. So thank you very much for joining me for hashtag Ask the Crazy Pigeon Lady. Don't forget to ask your questions in the comments, and I look forward to seeing you in another episode. Bye bye.